Trevor, you can stop explaining that security protocol. The words cut through my presentation like a knife. You won't be needing it anymore. I was halfway through explaining a cybersecurity audit that my team had spent 4 months completing for our TSSCI clearance renewal. The conference room went dead quiet except for the soft click of his Montblanc pen. Behind him, the digital clock on the wall showed 9:03 a.m. That's when he made his announcement, calm as you please. 53 positions terminated, effective immediately. Estimated savings, $1.2 million per quarter. My name was right there at the top of the list. I'm Benjamin Patterson, 52 years old, and I've been protecting government secrets longer than this kid's been out of Stanford. Naval Cryptologic Command for 12 years, then 18 more building cybersecurity systems for defense contractors. I've safeguarded communications that kept soldiers alive and contracts that kept America ahead. The authentication system I built requires human verification from trained security personnel before any classified contract can execute. It wasn't just software, it was a digital fortress built on experience and trust. But Trevor Hoffman, our new 38-year-old CEO, didn't see people. He saw spreadsheet cells to delete. Fresh out of Stanford with daddy's venture capital connections and a head full of AI fantasies, he believed algorithms could replace the wisdom earned through decades of service. He'd been here 6 months now, slowly dismantling everything we'd built with buzzwords about machine learning and zero human overhead. Today, he was making his final move. The pressure had been building since Q3 numbers came in below projections. The board wanted cuts, and Trevor had been circling our department like a shark ever since. Rick Thompson, our CFO and fellow veteran, had warned me this was coming. Defense spending's tight, Ben, he'd said over coffee last week. Trevor's looking for scalable cuts. But I never thought he'd gut the entire authentication team. Across the mahogany table, Rick tried one last time to reason with him. Trevor, this department handles our NIST 8053 compliance protocols. Without them, the North Point contract won't pass DCMA validation requirements. Trevor waved his manicured hand dismissively. Loyalty doesn't generate dividends, Rick. Efficiency does. Machine learning handles authentication now, not people. Those words stung worse than the termination notice itself. Around me, gray-haired engineers who'd protected American secrets for decades stared at their phones. Some called their wives. Others just sat there with folded hands, waiting for someone to tell them this was a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. It was Trevor's vision of the future. He gathered his papers and adjusted his Hermes tie. By tomorrow afternoon, we'll close the $2.3 billion North Point defense contract, he announced with the confidence of someone who'd never had to earn security clearance through years of background checks and polygraphs. A leaner company means stronger margins. I didn't respond because Trevor had no clue that the deal he was so eager to sign still required verification codes from the 53 people he'd just fired. Defense Protocol 53 wasn't just a number. I'd built it that way on purpose. As he strutted out of the room, the system we'd built, the one he'd dismissed with his MBA arrogance, quietly began counting down to the moment his empire would crumble. The room still smelled like coffee and desperation. My computer screen flashed a polite reminder that my access had been revoked. The silence felt heavier than a concrete bunker. I started packing my desk-old reports, my Navy coffee mug, a photo from our last team barbecue. That picture showed 53 faces, all smiling, none of us knowing we'd become line items in a cost-cutting presentation. When I reached for the power button to log out one final time, something unexpected happened. A single line appeared across my monitor in pale blue letters, Secure ID Active Access Pending. I stared at it, confused. My clearance was supposed to be gone. There was no reason the system should still recognize me. My phone buzzed. Text from Mike Rodriguez, our youngest security analyst and former Army specialist. The kid reminded me of myself 25 years ago, hungry to learn, respectful of experience. Ben, I just checked the mainframe. Your credentials are still active in the authentication queue. System says your TSSCI is required for Protocol 53. Did they forget to scrub you? I looked at that message for a long time. Truth was, I didn't know if it was an oversight or something deeper, a failsafe I'd built into the system to prevent exactly this kind of reckless decision. When you're protecting classified defense contracts, you build in layers, redundancies, safeguards against people who don't understand what they're dismantling. Don't worry about it, I finally typed back. They'll figure it out soon enough. I placed the team photo face down in my cardboard box. Around me, the office hummed quietly, pretending nothing had changed. One last glance at my monitor showed that strange message still glowing. Active, pending, waiting. No anger, no tears, just the cold calm that comes when you realize silence might be the most powerful weapon you have. As I switched off my desk lamp, the system continued its quiet vigil in the background, remembering every protocol I'd programmed into its core. Trevor could fire the people, but erasing 18 years of careful engineering? That would take more than an MBA and daddy's money. The system remembered. And tomorrow, it would remind everyone else too. The elevator doors opened with that familiar chime. We stood there like ghosts, each holding identical cardboard boxes filled with pieces of careers we'd thought were bulletproof. Coffee mugs, family photos, certificates that once meant something. Little reminders of the loyalty that had just been flushed down a corporate drain. Nobody spoke during the descent. These weren't just co-workers, they were brothers and sisters who'd served together, protected secrets together, built something that mattered together. Now we were just yesterday's overhead being escorted to the curb. Through the glass wall of the executive floor, I caught sight of Trevor laughing with a group of investors, champagne already flowing at 10 a.m. The same man who'd just thrown away 53 careers was celebrating his efficiency metrics while we rode down in silence. 1.2 million per quarter saved, he'd probably tell them. That's about 90,000 per person per year. Good money for good people who'd just been told they weren't worth keeping. Mike Rodriguez broke the quiet first, his voice barely above a whisper. You ever regret it, Ben? Staying loyal for 18 years? I looked at him red eyes, not from crying, but from the shock of realizing loyalty was a one-way street. No, I said quietly, but I regret thinking people understood what honor means. The elevator hummed as we dropped floor by floor, each number lighting up and vanishing like a countdown. Halfway down, someone sighed. Someone else cleared their throat, but most of us just stared at those doors, waiting for them to open onto whatever came next. When those elevator doors finally opened to the lobby, I stepped into the sunlight for the first time as an unemployed man. The marble floors reflected the building's glass towers, and somewhere up there Trevor was probably already planning his victory speech for the board, but I wasn't thinking about him anymore. I was thinking about the system, my system, and what it was designed to do when proper protocols weren't followed. The next morning, I woke up to headlines that made my coffee taste bitter. SecureTech Dynamics welcomes visionary CEO to lead digital revolution. There he was, Trevor Hoffman, the same guy who'd gutted 53 careers in 5 minutes, now smiling under studio lights like he'd cured cancer. The press called him innovative. The board called him the future. To me, he was just another MBA who confused ruthlessness with leadership. His background read like a Silicon Valley fairy tale Stanford graduate, daddy's venture capital connections, 3 previous startups that crashed and burned but somehow made him millions anyway. His philosophy was simple: cut people, boost profits, let AI handle the rest. During his 6 months at SecureTech, he'd eliminated our annual picnic, replaced department meetings with automated dashboards, and ordered the removal of all office plants because they don't contribute to quarterly earnings. At 11 a.m., he held court in our auditorium, camera crews hanging on every word. This is the dawn of true automation, he declared with the confidence of someone who'd never had to earn security clearance through years of background investigations. AI will replace 70% of our workforce by year's end. Sentiment doesn't scale, efficiency does. The applause was weak, scattered. People weren't sure if they should clap or start updating their resumes. His words hit like precision strikes wrapped in corporate speak. When reporters asked about the layoffs, Trevor actually laughed. Sometimes you have to prune dead weight to help the tree grow. He didn't seem to notice that many of us looked exactly like the branches he'd already cut. After the cameras left, the internal briefing began. Rick Thompson, our CFO and 20-year company veteran, cleared his throat nervously. Trevor, he said carefully, I need to flag a critical issue. The security team you dismissed handles the Northpoint authentication protocol. Without them, our $2.3 billion contract won't pass Pentagon validation requirements. Trevor barely looked up from his tablet. Rick, contracts are processed by algorithms now, not by people. Nostalgia doesn't authenticate billion-dollar deals. Machine learning does. The words dropped into the room like lead weights. Rick's face went pale, the same expression I'd seen on my own face yesterday when I read my termination notice. That clicked for me then. Trevor wasn't just careless or ignorant. He was dangerous. He didn't just make bad decisions, he made them with absolute certainty, believing his MBA made him bulletproof. As the meeting ended, he straightened his designer cufflinks, still performing for an audience that had already left. He thought he'd eliminated the last traces of human inefficiency from his perfect system. But networks built by military minds don't surrender their secrets to business school graduates. I spent that afternoon at Murphy's Diner across from SecureTech, the same place where Rick and I used to grab lunch and complain about Pentagon bureaucracy. Through the window, I could see the mirrored tower where Trevor was probably rehearsing his pitch to North Point executives. The contract signing was scheduled for 2:45 p.m. tomorrow, exactly 24 hours after he'd fired everyone qualified to authorize it. I opened my personal laptop, the one HR hadn't touched yet, and logged into the network using archived credentials that still worked. The system loaded slowly, showing familiar lines of code I'd written to protect classified contracts. My clearance level showed as restricted, but my monitoring access remained intact. Scrolling through the authentication logs, I found what I was looking for. Defense Protocol 53, active trustees required for contract validation. Deadline, tomorrow, 2:45 p.m. I leaned back in the vinyl booth, watching steam rise from my coffee. The numbers told the story. The same 53 people Trevor had eliminated to save $1.2 million per quarter were the exact authorization keys needed for his $2.3 billion victory. Without them, the Pentagon security framework would automatically reject any contract attempt. No override capabilities, no emergency protocols, no exceptions. I'd built it that way on purpose after watching too many defense contractors cut corners with national security. When you're dealing with DCMA validation requirements, there's no such thing as good enough. My phone buzzed with an email from SecureTech Legal. Urgent. Verify authentication status before final signing at 2:45 p.m. tomorrow. The message had been sent to my old company address and auto-forwarded to my personal account. Even the lawyers didn't understand how deeply my protocols were embedded in their precious system. For a long moment, I stared out the diner window at the building that used to be my second home. I could picture Trevor pacing his corner office, confident and rehearsed, completely unaware that his billion-dollar empire was balanced on a foundation he'd just destroyed. They had no idea what they were about to sign. Or more accurately, what they'd never be able to sign. I closed the laptop slowly, my reflection merging with the tower's glass surface. My voice came out barely above a whisper, talking to myself more than anyone else. Some lessons you have to learn the hard way. Then I placed my coffee cup down with deliberate care, as if every movement should match the precision of the system I'd built, one designed not for revenge, but for accountability. And accountability, like good code, never lies. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the diner as I gathered my things. Tomorrow would bring its own justice, delivered not by anger or spite, but by the simple truth that some shortcuts lead straight off a cliff. Trevor would learn that lesson soon enough, broadcast live to every investor and Pentagon official who'd believed his promises. I walked home that evening with something I hadn't felt in years, not satisfaction but peace. The kind that comes from knowing you built something strong enough to survive the people who don't understand its value. The system would do what it was designed to do. Protect what matters from those who don't deserve access. Tomorrow, Trevor Hoffman would discover that firing people is easy. But firing the consequences of your actions, that takes more than an MBA and daddy's money. The rooftop of SecureTech gleamed under the afternoon sun, transformed into a stage for corporate theater. Champagne bottles lined white-clothed tables, cameras flashed from every angle, and banners fluttered in the DC breeze with phrases like Next Generation Defense Solutions printed in bold blue letters. Standing at the center of it all was Trevor Hoffman, the man who believed he'd outsmarted both the Pentagon and the laws of common sense. He raised his crystal glass toward the Arlington skyline, his smile as polished as his Harvard MBA. Today, he announced to the assembled press and North Point executives, we eliminate the final barrier to true automation. I've successfully transferred all authentication protocols to our AI framework. No more human bottlenecks, no more inefficiencies. We are the future of defense contracting. Applause rippled through the crowd, investors, reporters, Pentagon liaisons in their dress blues. Only Rick Thompson wasn't smiling. Our CFO stood behind Trevor with his tablet, watching status updates that clearly worried him. He leaned close to Trevor's ear, lowering his voice. "The system still shows authorization pending," he murmured. Trevor didn't even glance at the screen. He waved Rick away like he was shooing a fly. "Refresh it," he said with the laugh of someone who'd never encountered a problem money couldn't solve. "The network's probably lagging from media traffic." "It's fine." Rick hesitated, his expression tightening behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd seen this before, leaders so confident in their brilliance they mistook luck for skill. But with cameras rolling and North Point executives watching, he said nothing. Trevor turned back to his audience. "You see," he continued, voice booming through the wireless mic, "we no longer require human signatures to validate success. Machines don't have emotions. Don't hesitate. Don't fail. Secure tech is built on precision, not sentiment." Below us, the Potomac River reflected afternoon light while government workers and defense contractors watched the live stream from their offices. None of them knew that behind Trevor's confident speech lay one simple truth. The system hadn't accepted his authority transfer. It had classified him not as an authorized signatory, but as an observer someone allowed to watch, not control. From Murphy's Diner across the street, I watched the broadcast through the window. His voice echoed faintly over polite applause. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because arrogance this spectacular doesn't fail quietly, it crashes with an audience. He kept talking, basking in applause from people who didn't understand what they were really celebrating. His reflection multiplied in every mirrored surface of the surrounding office towers, making him look larger than life. But reflections are just illusions, and illusions shatter when they hit reality. Rick's phone buzzed again. He checked the time, 2:17 p.m. Another message from legal flashed across his screen. Reminder, all 53 trustee verifications required. Before 2:45 p.m. Deadline. He looked up at Trevor, who was still performing for cameras, completely unaware that his foundation was already cracking. Across the street, I whispered to my coffee, "Keep smiling, Trevor. The system remembers everything you forgot." At exactly 2:45 p.m., the massive LED screen behind Trevor flickered to life. The entire crowd went quiet as he placed his hand on the digital signing tablet with theatrical flair. Cameras zoomed in. Pentagon officials leaned forward. North Point executives held their breath. Trevor pressed confirm with the confidence of someone who'd never failed at anything that mattered. The system froze. A single red line of text appeared across the display. Authentication failure, security clearance required. At first, nobody reacted. The press assumed it was part of the presentation. But Trevor's smile cracked like thin ice. He tapped the tablet again. Nothing happened. "Is this some kind of technical difficulty?" asked the North Point CEO, a retired general who didn't appreciate delays. Trevor's jaw clenched. "Must be a glitch." He turned to the IT director. "Reset the authentication portal." The man's fingers flew across his keyboard, his face draining color with each failed attempt. Finally, he looked up, pale as Arlington marble. "Sir, it's not a glitch. The system shows all 53 security trustees were terminated at 9:03 a.m. yesterday." The words hit harder than a precision strike. Investors exchanged confused glances. Pentagon liaisons reached for their phones. Rick Thompson removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes like he could erase what he was seeing. Trevor straightened his tie with shaking hands. "Override it with emergency protocols." Rick stepped forward, entering his master credentials for critical overrides. The screen blinked once, then went black. A new message appeared, sharp and final. "Unauthorized access attempt session terminated." The rooftop erupted. Phones rang. Voices rose. Someone shouted to cut the live stream. Reporters began snapping photos, sensing blood in the water. Through the chaos, Trevor's voice cut like breaking glass. "Fix it! I want that system online now!" The IT director's voice cracked. "We can't, sir. It's locked out completely. Only the original security trustees can authorize access. Hire them back," Trevor snapped. Rick's voice was soft but steady. "You fired them, Trevor. You can't rehire trust." The sentence hung in the air like fallout from a bad decision. Trevor turned toward Rick with burning eyes, but there was no comeback. Just the reflection of red text blinking endlessly on the screen behind him. Authentication failure. Authentication failure. Authentication failure. From across the street, I sat perfectly still, hands wrapped around my cold coffee. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, it was something deeper, quieter. Justice in its purest form, delivered not by revenge, but by consequence. Inside that chaos, the empire Trevor built on shortcuts and arrogance was collapsing before the world's eyes. As 3:00 p.m. struck on my watch, the system I'd created had done exactly what it was designed to do: protect America's secrets from those who didn't earn the right to access them. For the first time in 2 days, I allowed myself to breathe. The North Point executives were already packing up, their faces grim. $24 billion in government contracts don't wait for technical difficulties, especially when those difficulties expose fundamental security failures. Trevor stood alone on that rooftop, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of his downfall for the evening news. Sometimes the best lessons are taught in public. 3 weeks later, I received an email that changed everything. The sender was North Point Defense Systems, the same company whose contract had imploded on that rooftop. Subject line, Future Collaboration Opportunity. We've reviewed the authentication incident thoroughly. Moving forward, we'll only partner with the architects who built the system, not the administrators who broke it. Would you consider a Chief Security Advisor position? Remote work available, TS/SCI clearance transfer included. I read that message twice before closing my laptop. No rush of triumph came, just quiet relief, like finally exhaling a breath I'd held for months. The salary they offered was more than fair. More than what Trevor had been paying me, actually. Funny how competence gets valued differently when people understand what they're buying. That same morning, the Washington Post business section carried a headline that needed no explanation. SecureTech CEO resigns amid 2.3B contract collapse. Trevor's photo appeared beneath it, the same confident smile he'd worn on the rooftop, now reprinted under a story about accountability finding its target. I felt no hatred looking at that picture. No satisfaction either. Just the stillness that comes when karma stops circling and finally lands exactly where it belongs. The article mentioned he'd landed at another startup, probably with another daddy-funded golden parachute. Some people never learn. But that wasn't my problem anymore. The phone rang while I was making my second cup of coffee. It was Mike Rodriguez, calling from his new position at Raytheon. They'd snatched up half our old team within 2 weeks of the layoffs. Smart companies know talent when they see it walking out the door. "Ben, you see the Post article?" he asked, barely containing his excitement. "I saw it. Rick Thompson called me this morning. He's interim CEO now. Board fired Trevor after the Pentagon pulled 3 more contracts. They want to rebuild the authentication team. Offered me department head if I come back." I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching morning traffic through my window. People heading to jobs where they were valued, where their experience mattered. Good for you, Mike. You earned it. What about you? Rick wants to offer you CTO. Full equity package. They're serious about rebuilding trust with DoD. I thought about that for a moment. Going back to SecureTech would be easy. Familiar. But easy wasn't what I was looking for anymore. Thanks, but I'm good. North Point made me an offer. Remote work, full autonomy, and they understand what I bring to the table. Mike was quiet for a second. Then he laughed. "You know what? Good for you, Ben." Trevor thought he could replace experience with algorithms. Turns out algorithms can't earn security clearances. After we hung up, I walked down to Murphy's Diner one last time. The same booth where I'd watched Trevor's empire crumble was empty, waiting. I ordered coffee and opened my laptop to draft my acceptance letter to North Point. Through the window, I could see SecureTech's tower reflecting the morning sun. Workers were arriving for another day, probably wondering if their jobs were safe. The company would survive, it always did. Good people like Rick and Mike would rebuild what Trevor had broken. But it would take years to restore the trust he'd destroyed in 6 months. My phone buzzed with a text from my wife, Sarah. "Saw the news about Trevor. How are you feeling?" I typed back, "Like justice finally showed up to work." Her response came quickly. "Proud of you. Always have been." That message meant more than any job offer or newspaper headline. Sarah had watched me build my career one clearance at a time, one protocol at a time. She'd seen me come home frustrated when bureaucrats made stupid decisions that put people at risk. She understood why I'd built those safeguards into the system, why I'd made them impossible to override. The diner was filling up with the lunch crowd, government workers, contractors, people who understood that some things were more important than quarterly profits. I finished my acceptance letter and hit send. Benjamin Patterson, Chief Security Advisor. It had a nice ring to it. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Patterson, this is General Martinez from the Pentagon. I wanted to personally thank you for your service. The security protocols you designed have become our gold standard for contractor authentication. We're implementing them across all DoD partnerships. I sat up straighter, old military habits kicking in. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. Between you and me, what happened at SecureTech was a wake-up call. We've been too trusting of contractors who promise the moon but don't understand the fundamentals. Your system proved that experience can't be automated. After the general hung up, I sat quietly in that booth for a long time. Outside, the world continued moving cars, voices, life rolling forward with the indifference of a river that had seen everything twice. But inside, something had shifted. The weight I'd been carrying since that morning in the conference room was finally lifting. I whispered to myself, barely audible over the hum of conversation around me. Sometimes the best revenge is just doing your job right. Those words lingered for a moment before dissolving into the sounds of a city that had already moved on to the next story. I stood, gathered my things, and stepped into the Virginia sunshine, not as someone who'd been fired, but as someone who'd been freed. Because sometimes victory doesn't look like headlines or applause. Sometimes it looks like peace, earned through principles that bend but never break. And sometimes the best defense is simply building something so solid that even the people trying to destroy it end up proving its value. I walked home that afternoon as Benjamin Patterson, 52, unemployed for exactly 3 weeks and 2 days. But by evening, I'd be Benjamin Patterson, Chief Security Advisor, with a mission that honored both my experience and my principles. The system had protected more than just classified contracts. It had protected the value of doing things right, even when nobody's watching, especially when nobody's watching.